Thank you very much. We gather here today as members of a historic alliance, an alliance that saved and changed the world. And in a pursuit of a world without borders, we opened our doors to an unprecedented wave of mass migration that threatens the cohesion of our societies, the continuity of our culture, and the future of our people. We are part of one civilization, Western civilization. We are bound to one another by the deepest bonds that nations could share, forged by centuries of shared history, Christian faith, culture, heritage, language, ancestry, and the sacrifices our forefathers made together for the common civilization to which we have fallen heir. The reason why, my friends, is because we care deeply. We care deeply about your future and ours. And if at times we disagree, our disagreements come from our profound sense of concern about a Europe with which we are connected, not just economically, not just militarily. We are connected spiritually, and we are connected culturally. We want Europe to be strong. We believe that Europe must survive. And that is what we are defending. A great civilization that has every reason to be proud of its history, confident of its future, and aims to always be the master of its own economic and political destiny. It was here, in Europe, where the ideas that planted the seeds of liberty that changed the world were born. It was here, in Europe, where which gave the world the rule of law, the universities, and the scientific revolution. But only if we are unapologetic in our heritage and proud of this common inheritance can we together begin the work of envisioning and shaping our economic and our political future, unshackling our ingenuity, our creativity, and the dynamic spirit to build a new Western century. And finally, we can no longer place the so-called global order above the vital interests of our people and our nations. We do not need to abandon the system of international cooperation we authored, and we don't need to dismantle the global institutions of the old order that together we built. But these must be reformed. These must be rebuilt together with you. And this is why we do not want our allies to be weak, because that makes us weaker. We want allies who can defend themselves so that no adversary will ever be tempted to test our collective strength. This is why we do not want our allies to be shackled by guilt and shame. We want allies who are proud of their culture and of their heritage, who understand that we are heirs to the same great and noble civilization, and who together with us are willing and able to defend it. And this is why we do not want allies to rationalize the broken status quo rather than reckon with what is necessary to fix it. For we in America have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline. Because for us Americans, our home may be in the Western Hemisphere, but we will always be a child of Europe.
Family, I pray that this presentation finds you well, as we have a lot to unpack here with Marco Rubio's speech, who is the Secretary of State, who delivered a passionate speech in Munich, Germany, at the Security Conference that was touting Western civilization and how that civilization independently changed the world for the better more than any other nation on earth. This took place on February 14th, 2026. Imagine that, the day of love of Western civilization. Let's take away some key highlights from this Rubio speech. Here Rubio talks about we open our borders to mass migration. Now he's talking to a European summit, so it leads you to believe he's referring negatively to non-European immigrants that are threatening the cohesion of their societies, their culture, and the future of their people. when he acknowledges the mistakes of allowing the migrants in and is moving forward to rebuild, can I interest you in some ICE? What are we seeing in America right now with ICE? They are supposed to be taking out the so-called bad criminals, but as we have seen in Texas and other parts of the country, Minnesota, innocent families are being separated and lifelong citizens are being killed and mistaken for illegal immigrants. Here Rubio talks about reestablishing the natural community in relationship between Europe and its former colony, America. He is calling to restore and renew the sheer dominance they once had. He calls for solidarity when he says we are part of one civilization, one Western culture. And he talks about how we are bound by centuries of shared history, culture, heritage, and language. Family. Doesn't that fall in line with the theories, the aspirations, the efforts, and the mobilization of what our African ancestors did in the frameworks of Pan-Africanism, like Martin Delany, Sylvester Williams, Henry Sylvester Williams, Marcus Garvey, Kwame Nkrumah, Malcolm X? Europeans are openly calling for the global white European solidarity to secure their future. Rubio is skillfully articulating the strong connections that bind the alliance between Europe and America from a historical standpoint, and how important it is for Europe, the mother continent, to be strong. This is precisely what Pan-Africans have been wanting to organize towards, but it keeps getting suppressed and interrupted, is a strong mother continent of Africa. And he reminds Europe of the age-old superiority that birthed racism, oppression, and terror on the world of non-white people. It was Europe that gave us the world, rule of law, science, and religion. Like no other non-white nation didn't contribute to these things centuries before Europe even knew what law, science, and religion was. I mean, check out this. Here Rubio is signaling to Europe, hey, don't be ashamed of the destruction we have inflicted on the world. We need to be unapologetic about our heritage. And really, he's using the Sankofa meaning in the Akan African tradition to use our heritage and past to build our economic and political future. He also calls out and acknowledges the numerical population of European and whites compared to non-whites, that this mass migration of non-white people in Western nations is destabilizing their societies, and we know what that code word means. Are we picking up by now on the unapologetic tone and rhetoric and heavy emphasis on protecting the borders, limiting who and how many people migrate to these lily white, beautiful European Western nations that are not so lily white anymore? Telling them don't worry about being accused of xenophobia, and to gain control and take back our industries and supply chains that birthed capitalism and made them wealthy. And if we know history, that was at the expense of other non-white people. Again, Rubio makes another reference to holding on to the old order. We don't want to dismantle the global institutions that they built. Did they build them independently? Or was it through slavery, oppression, exploitation of African human and mineral wealth? Or of Asia's human and mineral wealth? Or of Latin America's mineral wealth? Here Rubio says expanding through missionaries, soldiers, explorers, traveling by ocean to settle new continents and to build vast empires across the globe. If you didn't know any better, and through colonial education has been indoctrinated in Western nations. You would believe that the West was settling new territories in the Americas and Africa and Asia and the West Indies because the world needed their authority on civilization. And if there were indigenous populations, they were savages, sanctioned through Europe's version of religion, and need to be civilized through terror, rape, fear, and exploitation. It doesn't matter, right? We're dealing with subhumans, according to Darwin's theory. If you don't know by now, Marco Rubio was given a very well-articulated, strategic, unapologetic, but very incomplete historical speech of a call for pan-Europeanism before we suffer the great Western decline. He says, we would much rather achieve this solidarity of the shared history that is replete in this speech. He calls for Europe to strengthen itself like it once was because they feel a weak Europe will not help the West to continue to dominate, and then against a call for the spirit of Sankofa, in a sense, that we use our culture and our heritage and our pride to maintain and defend our Western dominance. He calls for Europe to be strengthened. He calls for Europe to strengthen itself like it once was because they feel a weak Europe will not help the West continue to dominate the world through their culture, heritage, and pride to defend their Western dominance. Marco Rubio put a bow on the fact that the Western nations should not be ashamed of how they became wealthy in this world. And the funny thing is, they want to leave their children who are already living a very privileged position with preferential treatment laws in their favor, a call for them to be even wealthier. Imagine that. He also calls for pan-Europeanism, to return to the source to chart your future by saying we need to safeguard our interests and saying we don't need to be carrying these no-good leeches, which is code words referring to non-whites. How can Rubio say Western civilization civilized the world and leave out some glaring truths about how it was carried out? It's the same thing that plays out today when we have white America and Europeans literally trying to erase its sins by removing relics, artifacts, and texts that remotely discusses or reminds them of the horrific sins of their forefathers.